because we had to pay for a space. And because of that, then we had to find different ways to monetize and have our community help out and volunteer. So what we're trying to do with Chicago Blockchain Project is really based off blockchain, the heart of the public blockchain idea, which is through Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, a lot of people say it's the first blockchain, and we're going to get to private and public blockchains, which I'll start you off with. Private blockchain, that's pretty much bullshit. Private blockchains don't really have much use case, but permission ones do. What Bitcoin really did that's amazing was not that it made an internet currency or an internet cash that basically, like most things in the world, if I'm holding it now and I hand it over to you, go ahead, grab that. I don't have it anymore, but think about your email. Think about pretty much any file that you have. What it did was it found a system that actually allows for property rights. And that's a pretty amazing thing, because once when the internet came out, we kind of democratized the access to information, right? Anybody can put it out there, anybody can receive it. And now with blockchain, we're making a new protocol that is going to allow people to own a digital asset. Okay, and what Bitcoin did in making this was it took out a few pieces of the puzzle that are very, very dangerous in normal systems. Because if you're dealing with currency, people want to steal it. That's just straight up what it is. Everybody wants your money. So you have to be very secure with it. But if you can name one company that hasn't been hacked, go ahead, raise your hand. So it's probably not a good idea to put the control of any database type system, especially if the units that it's putting up there are your money, into the hands of like one person in control. And even if you trusted that person perfectly, what if there's somebody else at the company like Newman from Jurassic Park, who just takes off and falls, right? He's just sabotaging. Another thing you could say is, okay, well maybe we'll give like 3 or 4 people the ability to change the rules to this game. And that would be kind of a consortium in the blockchain, but we also have to remember that in the beginning of Bitcoin, they wrote into basically the second line of code, the chancellor is on the brink of a second bailout of the banks. So the person who made this was not somebody who was very into allowing a consortium of people, another word for consortium is a cartel of people who have control of the system. Because in 2006, 2007, leading up to the financial collapse, we saw that 5 companies colluded together to actually pay off the Independent Oversight Bureau. That was the rating bureaus. Now, we have a very similar system right now in international payments, where you have a company called SWIFT that's in between, and it's kind of the middleman for the bank-to-bank payments. And some of these companies are talking about, well, maybe we'll make a bank consortium because we can't all trust each other, but we don't want the information to be public. So they're already colluding to make this bank consortium, and we're going to think that by giving these 5 banks the keys to change the system and to game it or to collude, they're not going to, which is a very strange value proposition because they already did it when they didn't have to have the keys. They already did it when they actually had to pay off the independent oversight. So why would we think they're not going to do it now by just handing them the keys? So generally with the permission kind of blockchain setup, they have use cases, very strong business use cases that are generally going to be something that adds efficiency for bigger groups of companies, but doesn't really get out to the public. Now what Bitcoin did was it actually allowed the system to be open and permissionless. So what this means is the system is built to last no matter how many participants are in. You don't know how many people are going to be participating. How many people are going to be running the miners. We'll get into that. And how many people are going to be holding the currency. But all of these people, whether they're miners or they're building services like payment systems around it, they are all collaborating on one goal. And it just uses a market force to get them to collaborate efficiently. Think about at work, people are like, we need to find a way to motivate people better. And I always think, well, just take some of that profit and pay it to them. That would probably work pretty well. Well, there's an intermediary there. There's a person that owns that company who's saying, well, I want as much profit as I can possibly get out of this. And there's not a very good way for them to balance what that individual needs to be motivated and what the rest of the organization, all the other employees and stakeholders in that company need. And governments kind of do the same thing. They take in some money that we're putting together to get some work done, public education, the roads, whatever infrastructure we're building. But they have to decide and determine how much goes out to everybody. An interesting thing about the way Bitcoin handles that dilemma is it puts out a reward to people who have contributed time via their computer being hooked up at night. That costs electricity, and they got to pay for the computers, kind of their time. Or people can just buy in, they can buy a coin and add to the market value. But either way, it's the most egalitarian Ponzi scheme ever, because the whole thing, there is no head to come off. Instead, the value just goes out to all of the Bitcoins together. And that's why you're seeing this balance between what the individual gets and what the organization gets that is created by a market force rather than created by just somebody saying, this is how much you should get paid. Well, will probably make it work for you. And it's lasted 10 years doing that.
Excuse me, I just wanted to ask something. Really, it seems like Bitcoin isn't really a Ponzi scheme. It has that, like, you're not asking for people from the bottom to actually pay for the expenses of the people at the top. It seems like it's more like kind of creating an infrastructure and kind of a payment system for everyone. So even the people at the bottom are actually getting some value out of it, although maybe not as much value as the people who've invested in, but it's
yes. So that was being facetious. That's the most egalitarian Ponzi scheme ever. But the general idea is that yes, that all of the people who hold it are basically equal into a system. When the network goes up in value, however much you hold is how much it goes up. You can buy into that, or you can earn it through given time in the network. And the way people earn it is through the system of mining. Now, mining is needed because we start to think of this system, but the issue you got to get around is this governance of the system, right? Who here has played Monopoly with a family member? That was an older brother or older sister, or a younger brother, or younger sister? Did you change the rules to the game? Because I know I sure did. If I was losing, I'd absolutely change the rules. Or think like you tell your little sister, like, okay, you clean my room, I'll give you a cookie. She says, all right. She runs over her room, she does that, she comes back, and you've eaten the cookie. She's like, that's BS. She doesn't know what that stands for yet because she's little, but you got to explain to her, well, it's just not fair. I changed the rules to the game. That's kind of what our central banks do to us. They just inflate every so often, and we have to trust that they're doing it in our best interest. Now, I'm not saying here that they are or aren't doing it in our best interest, but the rules to the game can get changed by that one entity. Now, let's think about the cookie dilemma here. She's going to come back, and the next time you offer this, she's going to say, I want to make sure the rules don't change. So let's go ahead and write this down, what it is. That way, we know. And you go, okay, that's fair. And she comes back, and you've erased it and written in another number. You had control of that ledger, because the consensus was really between you and her, and who else cares if she gets a cookie or not. So then she says, all right, I'm not going to fall for this again. We're going to give this ledger to mom and dad. They're going to hold it for us. And you start doing that, and over the course of a week, the cookies are piling up. You're like, man, we need to buy cookies again. I'm going to have a bunch of them here. If she also has a bunch, maybe I could, you know what? Dad likes cookies. He's pretty fat. Let's let's see if he'll change the ledger for me. All right, so now she's back to that same problem. She comes back and it says 0 cookies for little sister, and she's like, how did the ledger get changed? We had it with Dad. I trust Dad. Right? And this is kind of like when you're holding your money on a digital ledger, how many of you carry cash or more cash than you have credit available to you? How many of you use cash more often than credit? So you kind of have to think about this natural evolution of how your data is stored. Originally, you had this data on your computer, and then you kind of built a server up in your room, which basically just means a bunch of hard drives in your house. And then we started using services over the internet that required us to be accessing the server at a company more than we're accessing just something that's located with us. And then we move even further, and they said, hey, we got this great idea, we're gonna put it on the cloud. Because the cloud sounds like it's all over everything. But what they really meant was, we're just gonna put it on that guy's server. All right, so we just put our sheet, our cookie sheet, in Dad's hands. But we kind of trust Dad. I mean, I don't know why he would, ruin this for me. He's got my best interests, I think. But we don't really know. Mining solves this problem in an interesting way. What it does is it creates an incentive for more people to participate in that system. Your sister, she gets smart and she says, okay, here's what we're gonna do. Twice a day, we're gonna get the family together. And we're all gonna agree how many cookies are going on in this cookie rack, okay? We're all gonna mark down our number, we're gonna look at each other's, we're gonna make sure there's no funny business going on. If yours goes up 5 cookies, somebody else's has to go down 5 cookies. Because I'm not gonna sit here and let this just get written over. And you're laughing to yourself, you're like, oh, that's kind of funny. As soon as she walks away, I'm gonna change it. She goes, but we're also gonna seal it. We're gonna seal that envelope, and we're gonna put a little hash on it. We're gonna make some type of code that we're gonna put on the edge that we know that this one goes in this order. So even if you change what's in today's ledger or sheet, what we wrote down and sealed up, well then you're gonna have to unseal the next one. So that, because we could always go back and look at that and prove and say, you know what? This doesn't add up from this one to the next one. And we'll have a continuous path all the way back. So if there ever was an issue where my cookies disappeared unfairly, I could go back and look at all of these notes we've made from the past month and know exactly the history of the cookies and how many are on our ledger. Now, this is a great idea for a little bit until you realize that how many times are you gonna come back just because little sister wants to put this process in place? Are you gonna come back twice a day from your busy day at work? No, why on earth are you gonna participate in this? I'll tell you why, because we're gonna take one of the cookies that normally would go to somebody, we're gonna say, this is the inflation of our cookie market. Every period that we come back, somebody's gonna win an extra cookie, and that could be you if you participate in this. That's the reward for mining in our system. That's how Bitcoin works. People give their hash power to the system, and by adding their set of eyeballs to this mix, they get a reward. So Bitcoin is the first of a public blockchain. Now, I like to think of public blockchains as basically a community that is governed by technology. Now, the rules to how we can change the information of how many cookies everybody has or how many Bitcoins everybody has are actually coded into the system, and there's a governance in it that says something along these lines. If 90% of you signal that you want to make the exact same change, how would you signal it? By just running that update in the software. And once 90% of you are signaling it, then it will become law. And everybody who's not running it will no longer have access to that data. They won't be a part of that anymore, they won't be securing it, and they won't be winning any more rewards. It's almost as if in our system here in the US, the way we voted was that, let's say we all want gay marriage. And I started up, I put on my gay marriage hat. And then you guys start putting on hats. And eventually, 90% of us are wearing the hat. The rest of you would be seceded from our union, and you would no longer be citizens until you put the hat on. And then at that point, we'd say, all right, we can all throw off the hat because we know that's just the law now. And we'll signal our next change that we want. So it's a very interesting governance system because the opposite of this is that you just sell your coin. You sell your stake in that system. You think about when Trump was elected, how many people said they're going to move to Canada, and how many did? Does anybody know somebody who actually moved to Canada? I've been asking this question for a year, and that's the first one, but I'm really entertained by it. Most of them didn't, though, because they had other parts of their life wrapped up in this system that they have in the US. Possibly it's a monetary thing, but most likely it's friends, family, their home, other things that outweigh the value of just the currency. Now imagine if you didn't like the way that money was being governed, and you didn't have to move to Canada to voice against it. You had an option to sell your coins and use a different currency. Those currencies are all based on a belief in something. Some of those beliefs are based on force, guns, military, something. Some of them, for most of history, even up until about the mid-1800s in the US, they were based on people believing in them or believing in the person who issued it. So it's based on trust. If I took all my corn to the market, I put it with the market leader and say, all right, write me some script so I don't gotta carry this damn corn around and then try to figure out how many corns per chickens and corn per shoes everybody needs. Instead, you just write us a note of how much value this has, and I'll take that around and I'll hand out these IOUs because everybody trusts you. And this is what gold was with banknotes in the US. It wasn't until the beginning of the 20th century that we actually had the central bank even enacted. So the people who are believing in public blockchains or who see that Bitcoin is a very big disruptive thing are generally either looking at, isn't it amazing that we can get hundreds of thousands of people, an unknown number of participants, to collaborate on a goal for 10 years and have that asset that they're collaborating on raise in value faster than anything else in history? Or they're thinking, I can't trust one person with data. I can't trust 2 people or 5 people with data. What I can trust is that anybody who wants to be a part of governing this can just opt in and be a part of it. And what will govern us is that we have to act in the benefit of everybody, or else people will leave. That's an interesting form of governance now that wasn't much available to us before. On the other side, you have a lot of people talking about the private blockchains, which the data structure of just chaining data together has been around since the 80s, early 80s. It wasn't new or disruptive. And the reason nobody used it is because it's very inefficient for anything you would use it for. Unless it's a public, open system where you don't know how many people and participants there are.
What about the federated blockchain? Would that actually be better where it's only limited to a group of people, but it's limited to a group of people who actually kind of need it and they have only encrypted access to whatever they need?
Let's discuss that
Ah,
private and the federated. The private one is basically, I like to use this because it's really just hiding behind something and saying, oh, we're blockchains, but we're not going to tell you why or anything. It's mostly hype. If you have anything talking about private blockchain, it's generally a company that's trying to capitalize on you saying that they have blockchain something. There's other data structures that are better for that. But the federated blockchains, well, we run into that situation. It's sort of a moral question to me because are we going to put the keys into 5 people's hands or are we going to put it democratically into everyone's hands? Now, if you put it in 5 people's hands, here's some of the trade-offs. The data can move a lot faster, right? Because you don't have an unknown number of people hooking their computers up to this thing. That's why Bitcoin's so slow. One, because it's only one layer of protocol. We have like 6, 7 layers of internet protocols that are making it so that we can stream HD video. But there's only one layer in the internet of value, of digital asset, of property ownership. So we're working on new layers. If you've heard of things like Lightning or Plasma or state channels, these are all different ideas. And there's even some that go down a layer that are more towards the network side of things that make it move faster. The federated says, we take that thing from saying that the trust lever's over here. Trust one person and just hope it all works out. Hope they don't get hacked. Hope there's nobody evil on their team, especially them. Then you take it to the middle and you say, okay, let's trust 5 people. Let's trust 10 people. The more that you add, the slower the system's going to be. But you have a benefit because if you can trust that nobody's going to be malicious against the entire system, because they're all participants, there's some huge benefits you can get. And the banks are going to love these systems because it allows them to be internally more efficient and suck a little more value out of society before people realize that they can just be their own bank. If we take that lever and push it all the way over, then we have Bitcoin and even Ethereum, which it's not completely over yet. Like, we still have a little ways to go. But these are just experiments trying to figure out if we can get there.
Excuse me, I
Yep.
just wanted to ask you about, so wouldn't there also be another kind of benefit for the federated blockchain or the public blockchain? Because all the data is kind of in the public blockchain, it's all there to the users. It's almost all open to the users. So for as currency, it's probably okay for because people don't really care about the currency transactions. People don't care about like hiding the currency transactions. But if it was like medical records, that kind of, and if everyone knows that you have like maybe stage 3 cancer or some other.
So what you're referring to is sometimes if it's private data like that, you wouldn't want a private blockchain because there's other better data structures to move the information.
Right.
But a permissioned and private, it would be very similar. There's a lot more arguments towards that saying that. So one of it is privacy and public. Here's one that you'll have 2 different definitions that people don't necessarily agree on or get. Some people think when they hear public blockchain that it means that all the information is public and anybody can see all the information that's in that. And sometimes that's pseudo-anonymous, like Bitcoin, it just shows the keys of the person. It doesn't say like, Jim's got 500 Bitcoin. It says a big long string of hash has that much Bitcoin, and everybody can see the whole block explorer, which is a system that allows you to see all the blocks and all the transactions that happen
Right,
within
and
them.
if you can figure out
But-
who that key goes
Right,
to.
so if you can figure that out, that's there. But public can on one hand mean that to some people, but I think the more accurate definition of saying a public blockchain is the mining process the people who are running nodes, the ones that are looking at all the data, right? These are the people in the cookie analogy who are getting together twice a day to look at all the information and verify that it's correct. On a public blockchain, anybody can run a node. An unknown number of participants can run nodes, not just hold the data. Anything that is permissioned is going to have a side effect of a cartel. Generally, if you have if you look through political science history, if you have groups of permissioned authorities, they tend to centralize like everything else, right? And you get a few less. Think of how all oligopolies are created. Think of how all of the media companies have turned into 3 media companies, all the tech companies. You know, they're getting eaten up by the big oligopolies, which doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of innovation at the bottom, people starting new things. It's just a side effect of this, and somehow Bitcoin has found this system that actually decentralizes it. So if you have to give permission to the people, that's what permission is referring to versus public. But then there's also private versus public of who can see the information. So a permission blockchain that's also private, I see no use for. Even that use case, because there's other data structures that can run privately between a permission set of people.
Right, but I was saying that would the, like the federated blockchain where the data is kind of shared among the people who are actually needing to use it, like for example, hospitals, the insurance companies, the kind of...
So right there, the people who are needing to use it, who identifies that they're the people needing to use it?
I would assume that it would be more medical community or
Right.
people.
So there would be an organization or somebody who's giving them permission to run the node and be able to access the data. So right there, once there's somebody who's giving it permission, it becomes permission, and then you probably have a better data structure because there's other systems that allow you to give people permission to run a node on a distributed system. So a lot of times, people are equating distributed ledgers and blockchains. Distributed ledgers are great. All blockchains are distributed ledgers. Not all distributed ledgers are blockchains. And distributed ledgers are great because they can run these consensus protocols that basically say, if you know at least 2/3 of the nodes are trustworthy, then we can have you in consensus and your transactions will fly just as fast as anything you've ever seen. That's pretty much the basics of it. Versus when you don't know how many participants there are, you have to be prepared for things like, well, what if 1/3 of your miners are in China and they shut off the Great Firewall, or put up the Great Firewall, and all of a sudden you have only 2/3 of the total nodes, so you have no clue what the disparity is. What if somebody creates a bot that's going out there and hitting IoT devices and turning on miners into this system? Right? There's a lot wider parameters, so you can't take something that says 2/3, and 2/3 is the best number that you can get. There's a thing, how many of you have heard of a thing called the Byzantine general problem? This is partly like a military thing, but more so a data thing today. And the idea is that if there's a castle in the middle, and you have a guy with the horse here and his army, and a guy over here, and a guy over here, and they can't see each other, they have to send a messenger, right? And they all have to attack at the same time to coordinate attack, or else it won't work. Now, all of a sudden, you have a lot of issues. You can prove that if 2/3 of these people are honest, that it will work, but you need all 3 to go. What about the messenger? What if the messenger gets caught in the middle? How does the guy up here know? What if the messenger going over here just never gets there? How does he know what to do? You can think of those same ideas and look up Byzantine's general problem, and that will show you this idea of 2/3 nodes
Scientists
versus
will never
with
say something
blockchain
that
ideas.
isn't
duplicated
All those
over and over
blocks
in the
are
lab
together?
against the control. So they'll almost hurt themselves with their honesty and say, the probability of it is versus somebody just saying something without any rule set. The probabilistic thing says that we can get a lot better than this 67.33%, right? Than 2/3 of the nodes. It means that over time, this can actually become a stronger and stronger guarantee. It's actually approaching a guarantee, like it's an asymptotic curve. It looks like this. It goes up, and then it's just always approaching it. But at some point, you're pretty damn sure.
So basically, the curve is kind of like approaches infinity, gets closer and closer, but it's not, it never touches it gets closer and closer to 100%, but it never touches the 100%.
Yeah, never touches one. So decentralization is one that a lot of people have different meanings for. And this article, it's called The Meaning of Decentralization, that Patel Buterin wrote, is probably the best explanation of it, because it actually goes into detail and realizes that when people are talking about this, they're talking about different things. And you see it a lot when people are talking about Ripple. There's always arguments on, is this decentralized or is this not decentralized? Well, architecturally, is basically going to ask, if one of the computers, the actual physical servers, goes down, if the server is held in one building and that building gets bombed, would the whole system go down? Architecturally, is it spread out enough that you couldn't attack all the computers at the same time? That's the decentralization there. Many systems, all the distributed ledger systems, are architecturally distributed. That is the whole point. However, a more important one, and probably the most important thing to consider, is the politically decentralized. Who has the control to change the rules to the game? That's always going to be the most important question. And I think when you get into blockchain, what you're going to start to realize is every one of these has a governance system. Bitcoin's uses proof of work as its consensus mechanism, which actually has a mechanism that's a winner-take-all system. It provides a reward to one person, which means that every time that reward comes out, it's probably more beneficial for you to join a pool. Who's ever been part of a lottery pool at work? You all give in $1, you all give in $20, one person goes, and then you split it up if you win, right? Who feels like they're stuck in a pool system in voting red or blue in the elections coming up? Right? Because it is a winner-takes-all system at each point, it actually has this effect that you have to pool, or else you're probably not going to be effective or have a chance. There's other systems out there, and they're parliamentary systems. In blockchains, you have proof-of-stake systems that allow you a little more flexibility in how you're deciding who's going to win what. But you have to think about what this means. A decentralized system where people are deciding, I have limited money to invest into something, to own it, to hold my value in it or my belief in it, and I have limited amount of time to invest in something. I have to convince others to believe in what I believe in. And therefore, because these systems, every decentralized system has an element of needing trust from the people who participate in the system itself, that means there needs to be a governance, which means that the parties on all sides are naturally incentivized to engage in politics to decide the value of this. So I would say if you're interested in public blockchains, you probably first and foremost need to become knowledgeable about economics and governance systems and mostly political science. Because you see it playing out that the venture capitalists in this decentralized systems they are playing a different game than what we've seen played before. That's really something that I can't get past or get into enough people to understand that the single most important thing you'll see in public blockchains is the governance and the economics of that system, which brings us into the idea of crypto economics.
Excuse me.
Question?
Yeah, you were saying that the venture capitalists are kind of playing in the different game than from what normal people would be playing, but does that mean that the kind of a public blockchain might actually hurt the venture capitalist more than it would hurt the regular person?
I'm really not sure how to answer that, actually. So let me go over a few ways that I see them doing things differently. Most recently, the majority of the crypto VC firms that we're talking to, they are somewhere in between a VC and a hedge fund. They're not really a VC, they're not really a hedge fund. Secondly, to be smart money in this, you don't necessarily need to be there making the connections. A lot of them are actually going out there just adding hash power to a network. They're making connections in server companies around the world to decentralize and have options for global networks that can plug in and basically be hash power as a service. We'll invest into you and buy some of the coins, but we're also going to make sure that your network is secure by watching it and making sure that the proper amount of nodes are being run. And then that means that as that network is being bootstrapped up, the people who are investing it outside of that VC then have to trust that the VC is not playing any games. So it's very difficult to decentralize a network now. We'll see which ones kind of win out and which governance structures. But a very interesting thing that we are seeing is that we're seeing politics and political science games play out in super speed. Like over the course of like a year, you see like 300 years of a nation's history just play out the government system all the way to the point where it kills itself, right? And becomes a self-organizing, self-selection system that's more akin through like the crypto economics of this. The crypto economics is saying, are we incentivizing enough new people to participate in protecting the system? And at the same time, are the economics of the system valuable enough that the network actually gains in value?
Which system are you referring to?
Really any of them. So when I say a system, I'm referring to Bitcoin as a system.
Ethereum?
And part of that would be, to go a little further into that, Ethereum would be a system. The reason I use the word system is very specific, that it is not a set of individual elements. It is not, because in a permission system or a private data system, you have nodes and servers, right, that are running the information. You have users of the information. And these things can be adequately analyzed by looking at just what they are and then adding them up together and saying, okay, with this amount of computing power, we should be able to run X number of transactions through this database to X number of users. It's a simple math. Versus when you have this open system, it's actually more of a balancing game. So it actually creates a system of relationships that are more valuable than the individual elements. This allows for a feedback loop of what is happening in the system. Think about that kid that runs his computer for Bitcoin at night.
Okay, so by system you mean Ethereum, all those systems that are backed by the blockchain. That's what you mean.
Right, and each one is running its own blockchain system.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think those feedback loops are heavy into what crypto economics presents us is that because the relationships are so strong between all those elements, we're seeing different results than people are used to with anything else. It feeds back on itself and makes whatever effect that it is extra strong. No, yeah.
One of the ways that I think about crypto economics or just this whole thing is like the difference between utility and profits. And that's that politics in between. So if you think about utility, it's like if you got a huge tomato and you took the seeds out of that tomato and then you spent 6 months to grow however many different trees, you gotta still turn that into profit. So the politics is that up and down price that you're gonna like get your first harvest and then some people are gonna pay you a quarter. So then that's that economic exchange, that back and forth. And then you're always doing your politics to get all the way to the maximum amount of profit, which is why are all of you all wanting tomatoes, or why don't you want cherry tomatoes, or the different variations of tomatoes? Because like when he's talking about the ecosystem, what he's really saying is that every plot of soil is its own ecosystem based on what kind of output or utility or profit you want to get. And if you're going on that spectrum in between, that's where that politics comes in on the crypto economic side.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy for.
Well, I was saying that it depends on your crypto system. I mean, right now, for example, Bitcoin seems like it will go up, but there's only a certain point that it will go up. There's a hard limit built into the Bitcoin system saying that you can only mine, I think, like so many coins.
21 million.
Yeah.
And absolutely having a either deflationary or inflationary currency is going to be a whole nother rule set that you're going to have to look at, because every single system or every blockchain has its own rule set. Some of them are just forks of another, and some of them are just completely different things. So now we have a bunch of different blockchains, and you hear things like DAGs out there and so forth. I want to go ahead and do an opportunity here for questions on just different blockchains or something that you've heard of or no.
Sorry, but I wanted to do something that's a little bit more esoteric since it's actually one of the newer ones, and that's EOS. Is that more of a public or private blockchain?
They're attempting to be a permission public blockchain. So they're delegating out, they're gonna say there's 21 nodes, staking nodes, who are gonna be the delegates who are allowed to select the rule set. Other people can run a node, but they're not going to be voters of the rule set of who can change the rules. And that's an issue that still needs to be played out. However, if you look at political science, the history lesson kind of tells us that that generally falls into becoming a cartel. Yeah.
There was this recent YouTube video on Andre Santanopoulos did on how he sees all the different cryptocurrencies, like he uses the analogy of languages, essentially. And I kind of get that, how that can play out that way. But then if that's going to be the case where you're going to have all these different cryptocurrencies, do you see Bitcoin kind of being really just a reserve currency and just becoming like digital gold, essentially?
I think it's, for me, I'd like to, but I think it's very hard to say, because we haven't seen governance systems play out this game long enough. We're actually, it's kind of funny that we're almost at the same point in Bitcoin's like political life as the US is right now in its democracy, where you're having like the two sides are kind of spreading apart a little bit more, and there's starting to be like some argument back and forth, and they're less like, the central sides aren't what's strong. It's kind of like the outer edges of both sides are kind of what's strong. And there's a lot of people in the middle of that fight that just aren't as loud. And I actually believe that just like the winner takes all system creates a bug in governance. So I think it's probably very difficult to say that Bitcoin in the long run would be, but I could be 100% wrong on that. We don't know. Because on the other side, it also creates that opportunity for somebody to keep coming in and challenging it, right? It promotes innovation and people to, you know, the new ASICs and everything. A lot of people talk about it. If you were to only allow certain hardware to do it, to do the mining, well then most people can't use their computers. Well, yeah, but where do you get like the innovation that makes people make things better? And that's what actually makes it more difficult for people to attack it. So if you cap that, eventually it becomes something that is attackable. So
Well,
we'll see where that one plays
I
out.
also think that the other issue is that, that it also depends, like, it may not be that there may be like one reserve currency, it may be like if there's a pool of big reserve currencies, Bitcoin could be among one of those, and you might have other currencies that you can also do transactions.
Anybody else have any? Yep.
I've started to look at most of the cryptocurrencies in the sense of like how politics around citizenship is for people. You can have an authoritarian government, you can have a liberal democracy, you can, and the other day, a politician said, I talk to all kinds of people, kings, dictators, authoritarians, prime ministers, presidents. He said they all gotta pay. And what he was getting at was, we're the biggest dog in all of this. We make the demands with the carrot or the stick. And until that changes, none of those things matter at all, because you all gotta come back to the boss that's giving you your protection. And I thought about that in regards to Bitcoin. So my question is, how do we avoid that happening? Because the real goal of this is to be able to transfer value across the spectrum of different environments where we can all have something in return, not just the US dollar. Maybe it might be the yuan, maybe it might be the franc, it might be a currency that's local, so that we can then have better existence. But what I'm hearing more people be concerned about is the value of Bitcoin equivalent to $1 instead of the value of Bitcoin is equal to utility or some kind of ROI for the future, not just the politics of right now.
Yeah, that's a little bit loaded off like the term alone, but I would say that in that Bitcoin question, there's a few pieces in there. One is that the idea of sound money. Right? We used to have like specie as a type of money. Like that's what the gold bullion was. That would go from market to market. There's hard money, and that's actually like if you look at different local systems, markets, and then even above those markets, places where banknotes were able to be, there were little sub-currencies that worked better for local areas. And there were some that had better characteristics of money. So they were more durable, they were more portable, they were more divisible or so forth, that allowed that money better, stronger properties or characteristics as money, which then made it so that became the store of value, what would appreciate, versus the other ones at the bottom became what was called easy money. And it seems like in a lot of the crypto world, there's something against easy money, but really a good balanced system has both. Because when we took away the gold standard, we didn't replace the easy money on the bottom. So the dollar became the hard money, it became the highest appreciating asset ever. And compared to every other asset basically in the world, you're looking at the dollar, US dollar, and saying, okay, well now people are hoarding it, why are they doing that? Well, because it's the highest appreciating asset. There's basically a law of currency that says that you will always spend the one you think is going to be worth less the next day, right? So that's the easy money. Now, easy money comes in a lot of different things, anything we exchange value from. So it's not really a bad idea for there to be little subsets of easier and easier money where trusted small groups actually encourage more engagement of people, right? They encourage more economic activity. So you should have basically a reserve currency or world reserve currency that is your most sound money possible. Now, whether that's digital or not, whether it's Bitcoin or not, I think it's way too early for anybody to realistically know. But I do think that the tokens themselves, all these other units, they're basically a unit of account behind an idea or a goal. It's really just keeping score of that ecosystem and how much equity different people have contributed to that ecosystem. So the future that I see has basically a new token for everything that we do. Every organization is represented by one, every asset's represented by one, every individual is probably represented by one, because you can just put your stake into somebody or something or some idea you believe in, and then leave it there until your values tell you, well, this thing is doing something beyond what my values are, so I'm gonna opt out of the system. I'm gonna sell that coin. I'm no longer gonna let it hold power, or at least not from my beliefs. And that's a pretty out there thing, but I like to see where it goes there. Rondo.
Hi, Joe. So we all know that, about 95% of blockchain expression or its utility is used in fintech, such as cryptocurrency and tokenization of activities. And in the blockchain community, we all kind of agree that decentralization approach, not private blockchain, is useful because we don't want people doing the cartel. But there's the remaining 5% of application right now that's continuously emerging and expanding in the market, such as the use of blockchain and other purposes in software, such as registry and other application. So given with this kind of emerging trend, 5% in 2025, it will trickle down to household. So do you still agree that we still need a decentralized form where everybody must agree? No. Do you still agree that it's still open because we don't want the data altered? I'll give you one case when Kitty, what was it entered in Ethereum? Kitty thing. When they infected the Ethereum blockchain, it slowed down, it lagged down.
Yeah.
So now the question is, since we have this other application of blockchain, such as ownership and registry, do we still agree that it is still open when people can suddenly put the system and overload the system? So I think we all agree right now if it is finances, you see decentralized and public. But other applications as well pose another perspective on how we should do the governance of the blockchain. Should we do it public or private? Or there are other options of how we govern it. So I think this is for me to push back, to throw back to the audience because, if we use blockchain as a software such as ownership, such as intellectual property rights, and if you are the one running it and suddenly comes in people and put a heavy load in the blockchain, it will give serious problem because it will slow the system. So how would you, given with this scenario, how would we?
I'm gonna pull back into some of the terms and stuff for what we're looking at, and then we're gonna do some networking after. So like getting a little off topic of what we were expecting to go through here today, and then we'll save some time for the more esoteric conversations and so forth as well. I want to go back to these terms here. Protocol. Does everybody have a definition for protocol? Go ahead, shoot your definition for protocol.
So basically, it's just a framework of communication between two different individual pieces of hardware or two different services.
Framework of communication. So somebody else elaborate on that.
A law?
A law.
An established procedure.
Established procedure. And the reason we need a protocol is
Because we
Standardization.
want to communicate between two applications or two
communicate.
services.
we want to talk together. We want to be able to work together. It's almost like we want to be able to collaborate more efficiently on things. Interesting thing about the protocols is it allows for a certain amount of synergy in a system, which means that system, that blockchain system, is able to create a 1 + 1 = 5 scenario. It can actually create that. And you think about protocols, digitally, it seems like this weird thing. However, when you wake up in the morning and your bed's like 8 inches off the ground and you go through the door frame that is the exact size that you can go to Home Depot and buy another door that will fit perfectly in it, we don't think that protocols are that crazy. When you can plug in a hose into your sink in the kitchen and your furniture all fits perfectly under your table and none of the chairs are just too tall or just too short, usually. And things like that. We have a lot of protocol in our everyday lives. We know which side of the street to drive on so we don't run into each other. And digitally, it looks a lot more like this. Like we have 6 protocols that guide everything we do in this like infinite digital universe. And now this actually is allowing us a way that people can pay for infrastructure. When something goes wrong with the roads, we generally have to tax the people who are using those roads at some level, whether it's local or federal, and then get that money diverted into the system, hope nobody takes too much of a cut for their own, and efficiently get it back to paying for those roads. Versus in these open source systems, you can actually just hold the underlying asset of Bitcoin and develop and work on the system, and by contributing to the system and all these different people playing their roles, their parts, we found a way that you can actually find a market force balance that is always incentivizing just enough people to collaborate on improving the digital infrastructure. And think about this a little bit deeper as to these protocols. They have a value. It's easier to identify if you think of it like this. Your iPhone charger pisses you off because all your other phones had a different charger. Now, if you could buy a token and put this thing in your pocket, and every charger you came across would magically fit, how much would that be worth to you? 20 bucks? Raise your hand if you paid 20 bucks for that. Magic token. It's not snake oil. It actually does this, okay? Just for the sake of this argument here. 20 bucks. Would you pay 20 bucks that every charger you ran across was always the same one? All right.
Or it would be universal.
Yeah, that's basically universal. You take this thing off, you sell that token, you no longer have a protocol that communicates between your charger and your phone. So digitally, you might think of this, we have an infinite playground out there, that the protocols are basically the same as that little protocol that says what shape this plug is, that allows different systems to work together. And there is a value to it. And if the market value was, there's only 100 of these tokens out there in the world, now how much do you think that token would cost? Would it be 20 that you said you'd pay for it earlier? Or do you think the market would be charging $100 for it? Raise your hand if you think it would be more than $100 for the token. There's 100 of them on the market. Okay, I think we agree. More than 1,000? 7.5 billion people? I think so.
Well,
I don't know. Well,
Wouldn't you use the way economics goes, if something is in demand, price, is that what you would put the demand in?
Yeah.
For the product?
it's just a simple demand supply.
Yeah.
right.
Now, let's think about these protocols that are digital protocols. Right now we have one that is called TCP/IP. And that lets your computer see other computers and you can connect on the internet. And we have HTTP
UDP.
and UDP and a bunch of protocols have been made now. And Bitcoin's basically the first one that allows for actual property ownership digitally. So the protocol kind of says, here is how you value to the protocol before, all the money was made in the applications, in Facebook, in the Google. But what we really need is infrastructure that allows us to share information. We don't have a different set of roads for every company that exists and then try to figure out how to build bridges in between them. And each company doesn't have its own electric grid. We have infrastructure, and we democratized access to information through the infrastructure of the internet. Now we're democratizing the access to property ownership through the new infrastructure, or what they're kind of calling Web 3.0. And that's basically because of this idea of FAT protocols, that there is now a way to pay people for open source software, for building and maintaining the infrastructure. If the infrastructure is falling apart, people will start to sell their coins, and the developers who are holding those coins and who had already bought stake in that system are going to say to themselves, well, that was a great idea that that other organization, maybe Ethereum, put in there, and it's out competing us now. Maybe we have to do something or put an upgrade in our system since we're falling behind. Or maybe a bunch of others are going to be incentivized to work harder. And the idea of FAT protocols is just that now there is value at the protocol layer. When you look at the entire blockchain scene, again, it's going to come down to this idea of evolution. There's a self-selecting system here. They're taking in the incentive of value in the world, and it's actually incentivizing. Just like flowers go towards sunlight, and then they're the catalyst, and they change that into growth of that flower. That's what people do with value or money incentive. The developers see the value that's behind the different systems, and then they go and work and actually expend their energy working and developing systems on that ecosystem, whatever it is. So maybe they're building applications on top of Ethereum or dApps, decentralized applications. The difference when I say decentralized, again, being the political decentralization, that nobody can change the rules to how the computations in that application go. And all of this actually brings us to, this is kind of my final piece here, is that it brings us to an era of collaboration. This is because you now have the ability to represent value digitally instead of physically. So instead of having only scarce resources, you can create new little tokens of digital value that represent the equity of time that you've put in. Like right now, we don't have enough money in the world to serve all the people in the world, and that's part of what we fight over. And if we were to inflate to have enough money, well, we would all have to feel that for, who knows, if it would be a year or 50 years or 1,000 years, I don't know. But we would basically make all of our money completely valueless to try and catch up for a long time. Now all of a sudden we have this new opportunity where with that digital value, people can just participate in these blockchain systems and give their time, put their money into them, put their value behind them, and they can grow. So when I say we're on the era of collaboration, that idea in combination with the idea that these systems capitalize on synergies. 1 + 1 is 5, and then they take a little bit of that extra and they pay to the system. They wouldn't survive if that wasn't the case, because then they'd have a negative output there. They'd eventually just die off. They wouldn't be raising in value, so nobody would be incentivized to participate in them. So what we're seeing is it's actually creating systems that, like Facebook, have a network effect. That means that the more people that participate in the system, the more value the system has. But instead of all that value being just scraped off by shareholders. Bitcoin and Ethereum are user-owned, community-owned organizations governed by that technology. So that's the era of collaboration. And I think that's kind of where we're moving to, so we can take questions. Yeah.
Can you go back to the concept of a fat protocol and how that differs from a thin protocol or thin versus thin application layer and just the spectrum that it sits on?
Sure. So, and there's a thesis called Fat Protocol, and if you want to look it up, it's by a guy named Joe Monegro, and he's with a group called Placeholder VC. He wrote the paper maybe a year or two ago, and the idea behind it was that the internet with TCP/IP made no money for TCP/IP, the protocol. But the applications like Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram, those were very valuable to invest in. Now what we're starting to see is that the Web 3.0 is going to be a very, very modular stack. You might have 30 protocols behind something you build. You could think of it more like a platform. Think of Facebook. Imagine you're using Facebook and you don't like the way information's getting to you. Imagine you could sell your Facebook One coin and buy it for a Facebook True News coin. And by having that one, the information that gets to you in your feed is based on a system that you are holding stake in how it works. It's an infrastructure that delivers it. Where Facebook is basically just a platform where you say, I want to insert this model for how I find friends, and I want to insert this model for how this information comes to me. All those things that are just systems, protocols, standards of communication that allow the information to most efficiently be worked on together, just like the standards of the switch being the same charging plug, right? Just like being able to plug in a hose on any water spigot. The FAT protocol layer, at first when he wrote the paper, he thought it was going to be one protocol and the applications could catch very little. Now what it looks like is applications are really going to be just stacks that connect and let you modularly insert all your different protocols. You have governance, you have consensus, you have your data, you have a privacy protocol, you have all these things, and your data is something that you own the property of. And so when you plug into Facebook, whoever you allow to see that data will be able to compute with it and verify that it's true, or do whatever data functions they need to do with it, but then you can take the access to that data away. And that's kind of our next step that we'll see that I think will make that whole modular stack. There's a few different companies like Enigma Protocol and Zcash, different ideas behind privacy that as they get worked on will allow for your data to not be accessed by somebody. You always say like, well, couldn't they, I might make it so they can't download my Google Sheet, but couldn't they just take a picture of it? Yeah, it would be a pain in the ass, but they'd have the information. For us to be able to do like big data analytics on HIPAA-sensitive records, we need to be able to compute the data without any of the participants who are doing the computations knowing what that data is. And that's the next layer that's being built now that I think is most interesting, most amazing. We'll see that modular stack.
Question regarding how does smart contract tie to the blockchain?
Smart contracts?
Yes.
So smart contracts, the idea is that there's a computation that needs to be done. That when I talk about the trust on who's gaming the system, we were doing a little cookie thing. In a smart contract, you need to understand and know that the governance is making sure that nobody will game this system, right? They need to know that the computation that happens is trustworthy. How do they know it's trustworthy? Same way they know the ledger is trustworthy, because many different computers are taking part in processing the data or changing the state of that data. So the smart contract, the way I like to think of it, is it's pretty much just a system of escrow. It's like a vending machine, all right? Value goes in, and then something has to happen. It's an if-then statement, and then an output occurs. That's pretty simple, except for, well, that's most computations. What makes a smart contract different? Because it's happening in a decentralized system. So whereas Bitcoin only is looking at the ledger and verifying a very specific set of rules that works well for currency, the application there is currency. Ethereum is basically rewarding people for running their computers for computation in what they call the Ethereum virtual machine. So you can think of that as an operating system that's run by a architecturally and decentralized, politically decentralized group of computers all over the world. An unknown number of participants that can run their own software to connect as long as it follows the rules, and all those together compute it and make sure that the power, nobody can gain that system, hopefully. So it's really taking the trust level over. So if you do a smart contract on a private system, well, if it's one person running it, same as the currency thing, right? The computation could be gained because you're trusting one person. And if you trust a federated system, well, if you're inside that system, if you're one of those 5 banks, good for you. You're probably going to bring home a big bonus check. If you're outside that system, well, they just don't care. They may or may not have your interest in mind.
So it's like, there's a lot of chatter in the crypto community about this, the fact being launched in December by New York Stock Exchange. And while I think that those are like necessary evils to increase crypto adoption, do you think it's just the wrong path for the crypto community to go down? Or do you just, they see this just inevitable things that are just going to happen? And because, you know, you're not owning your private keys in that, in those type of scenarios.
Yeah, I don't think things only get better, like everything kind of waves. One of my papers in college that was really fun to write was like in favor of child labor. Like, and we had to challenge ourselves to write something that was completely against common thinking and find like, oh, well actually, like there's some systems where this works out. It actually got those countries to a point where they didn't need that and could get past it like 5 times faster. So we could all hope and wish, but actually allowing the child labor got them through there faster. I kind of see it as that situation where it's not a good answer, but if people are even aware of what Bitcoin is, then they'll probably start to learn about this decentralization. Just because you can be your own bank doesn't mean that there's no other benefits if you're not using it for that reason. I think having a global currency is something that'll probably promote peace. I don't know if Bitcoin will be it, but just being able to have a common language we can both trust, no matter where we are in the world, is a good thing, and especially places like Venezuela. You know, just the fact that they can have a more stable, because to us it's volatile. To them, it's not that volatile. You know, it's a world currency, so it's going to be relative for the world. Britt, you want to do some questions, or?
It's up to you guys.
Anybody got some questions?
I have one more.
Yeah.
What do you think about IOTA? Seems like it's not really a blockchain, almost. It's something totally different.
It can be, but it doesn't necessarily have to. It basically is IOTA stands for Internet of Things, and you could create like a IOTA device that kind of utilizes and kind of has some sort of connection because you have the network, but it doesn't necessarily have to be in the blockchain. You're just usually using some sort of TCP/IP protocol rather than a true blockchain protocol.
So IOTA is a directed acyclic graph. The idea is that it's called a directed acyclic graph. The idea behind these is, specifically IOTA, is saying that for you to benefit from it, you have to put some work in, which is a similar idea. And if you're going to make a transaction, you have to verify 2 other transactions. It sounds like a great idea, but it is also a consensus mechanism that we kind of already had. So to make it open and permissionless is a whole nother thing. And there's a few of these systems out there that are building on these directed acyclic graphs. And the interesting thing is without probabilistic benefit of a blockchain, then you run into this 2/3 of nodes issue. And when you're looking to be an IoT device, that's very hard to guarantee. So I think that there's kind of an issue there. Right now it runs, there's a lot of stuff out there that's just kind of, people yelling at them because they made other people mad. But I do think that they did a mistake that they call like rolling your own crypto, which basically most cryptography, you're not going to make your own. It's pretty much the #1 rule in cryptography is don't make your own algorithms. There's ones out there that are mathematically tested and verifiable, and those are what you should use. That's just how the math works. And they made their own, and they came up with an interesting reason for that, which is kind of against the ethos of open source. And they also tried to hide it that they had a centralized coordinator node, rather than just saying we're bootstrapping this network centralized to get to the point. Because how do you get to enough nodes that you know that 2/3 of them are good? You'd have to get to a fairly high number of nodes. And they were saying, oh, we're going to make partnerships with Bosch and all these other companies. We're going to have enough nodes out there that we can eventually get rid of that centralized coordinator. Now, there might still be use cases for it, but as far as the open source ethos, they've openly attacked the people who are most knowledgeable on the cryptography side, who are checking and verifying that there aren't any issues in their system. So an open source system relies on contributions from lots of different people to protect it. And if all the people who are specialists in that area know that if I try to help them by identifying things and notifying them in the proper way, that I'm just going to get shit on by them, then there's probably not going to be a lot of people doing that. So I think that's a big issue that they'll have to overcome. Since it's an open source project, you never know. Like, I mean, those people don't own the project. They do now while it's centralized, but eventually they might not, so.
It's kind of centralized today.
Yes.
Like small community as well then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got a question over here.
Can you go back over, in a nutshell, the difference between application and protocol?
Yeah. So the application is generally runs on your device. Right? You have apps on your phone, you download the app, it's running there. The protocol is basically saying, how does that application connect to the information? There's a computation in the application. It's going to get very rhymy for a minute. I apologize. And then there's data somewhere. It's on a server somewhere. Might be on the cloud. The protocol is saying, how do we create a system that allows the data and the computation to communicate effectively for those two systems to collaborate? So when you talk about like client server, you're talking about, okay, I'm building a web application, so it's an application that's hosted on the cloud that will run the computations to data that might be in the same spot or might not, but we have to make a protocol to connect them.
Right. You could
so-
even have native app where you still have the same types of protocols, but the application might be looking for the data more locally and doing the computation there. That would give you a slight speed up, but you would have kind of a limited amount of data set. So application is just basically something that does the work, and protocol is just the way you communicate between the app and kind of the data source or anything else.
That's perfect explanation.
Yeah, if I could follow up. The reason why I asked is because I'm making a cryptocurrency with automated wealth redistribution. So I wanted to figure out how to do the redistribution quick and dirty. And I was looking at the code for Nano. And I said, I want to use this as a kind of a basis. And I said, well, how would I basically fork this? And I was looking at the process to fork it, and I said, just start over again. I said, well, where's the Genesis block? I know that was one of the terms there. And I said, well, it's just hard-coded in their software. I said, well, what's the difference between the implementation of the protocol, which is the application, and the protocol? And I was having almost like a philosophical debate within my own mind and saying they're one and the same, unless I'm missing something in reality. So I'm thinking of even like programming of an interface and the implementation of the interface, classes that implement the interface. But in terms of this protocol versus application, the application is the actual protocol.
So what you're looking at is the protocol of Nano. Doing the distribution, you would just change the governmental rules of exactly how it redistributes. Correct?
Well, I was researching how to get that mechanism. And I said one idea was just to effectively fork it. So then I said, what's the mechanism to fork it? And I said, well, it's basically just changing the Genesis block in the app. I said, well, then where's the protocol? Who's validating that the protocol is being followed? And it's like, either I'm not understanding something or it's not. It's just, you just need to make sure you have the right software.
Yeah, it's the protocols are all just software. Right? Bitcoin is just open source software. Right? And it's actually, another difference is that protocols are generally rule sets. You can think of it like being at a restaurant that is vegetarian, right? Now you'd have that same history if you took that whole menu, everything that they're doing, their design plans, everything, and open